Welcome to the LDHR podcast, the place to learn, explore, develop, and connect so that we and those we lead are known, needed, and have a future. In this series, we're exploring our member care model and discovering what it looks like to live out and lead through master care, self-care, team care, and movement care. We will hear from people all over the world how they're living this out and how we can learn from them. Come on in and listen. We're so glad you're here. Hi, Paul Cheesman. Welcome to the LDHR podcast. We're really glad that you're able to join us today. Before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about your current role and where you are serving?
I can happily do that. Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be part of this. So I'm serving in the UK, born and bred here, and apart from a little bit of wandering, have been here most of my staff life. I'm currently serving as part of the Global LDHR team. I've got a couple of roles. One of them is kind of like the global employment HR kind of specialist, but my main day-to-day role is I lead what's called the works team. So we're responsible for web, events, resources, consulting, and social media.
Fantastic. Thank you. So as you know, we're doing this series on member care, looking at the 4 components of care, starting with master care and self-care, team care, and movement care. And This is actually kind of our bonus episode for team care. Things have changed in our world quite a bit, and more we're seeing virtual teams pop up. And so that creates some challenges leading virtually. So I wanted to know, what are some of the unique challenges you faced in leading a virtual team compared to an in-person one?
I think for me, the biggest one that I hit was, what does the relational bit look like when you're in the virtual space? I'm just highly relational by nature. So figuring out, what does chat look like when you're not, coming into a room and getting yourself a cup of tea as you do it, and that before the meeting stuff. The thing with most virtual meetings is you tend to jump straight into agenda. So actually looking at, what does chat look like? What does the normal dynamics of kind of team building on a day-to-day basis look like on a virtual team?
Yeah.
And for me, that the other one that jumps to mind is just the practicalities of reading a room. Again, I rely on being able to do that in most of my leadership, just sensing atmosphere, sensing tension, sensing the dynamics of interaction. And all those pieces are just so much harder. So you kind of end up making a lot of mistakes of atmosphere, and you have to do a lot more kind of checking in with people than you would do if you could just read the room.
Yeah, absolutely. When everyone has just their little screen in front of them, sometimes it's hard to see what their body language is like or the atmosphere around them.
Yeah. Just the dynamics when, as you say, if everyone's in their own little Brady Bunch box rather than together in a room.
Yeah, absolutely. So what key skills or traits do you think are essential for leading virtually? Maybe that are similar to leading in person, or maybe that are different?
Yeah, I think most of the things are the kind of things that any leader leads, but just enhanced in somewhat different ways. So I'm like every form of leadership, the big one is just building trust and recognizing how you build it and how it diminishes in the virtual world. So there's just lots more increased opportunity for miscommunication and misunderstanding when you're leading virtually. So trying to develop that culture of believing the best in others is just even more important in the virtual environment. Checking in with people, apologizing. I've learnt to apologize often and more consistently in this environment than in any other one. Yeah, I'm really grateful that I've got a highly conscientious and high-performing team to work with in this one. But building trust is kind of like the starting point. The other one, next one, which flows on from that, is around excellent communication. It's kind of at the heart of our Building Powerful Ministry Teams model. But yeah, there's some dynamics in the virtual space, a couple in particular. One around organization. I'm not naturally that organized, so I tend to be a little bit more random on stuff, but this has definitely pushed my organizational skills to a level. And in particular around technology and how you share information and making sure you've got good systems. So being tech savvy is just really important. You need to be comfortable to be part of a virtual team in the technological world, but to lead, you need to just be perpetually learning and reinventing in the technology space. Which kind of leads to my last one, really, which is just adaptability. This is one that they tend to be more naturally better at anyway. But there's just a lot more pivots that you have to do than if you're just in a physical team environment. You know, a couple of years ago, 2 of my team members moved from Singapore to California, and that instantly shifted the schedule of when we met every week because you have to factor in time zones in a different way. So just your adaptability muscle gets pushed quite well.
Yeah, those are definitely some key characteristics that help leading a virtual team, some of that
Yeah, yeah.
adaptability, that fostering the trust. Yeah, even being tech savvy, how these things work, you can communicate with one another. And speaking of that communication, there's the aspect for you as a leader to have good communication. But how do you even kind of ensure the effective communication across the team, especially when you're not there in the room?
Yeah. Yes, as I've said, good tech is just important, both in terms of hardware and software. Excuse me, getting technical on the tech, but software, knowing the systems that you use, so knowing which kind of video communication or whatever which platform that you're comfortable with, and so you're not perpetually at the beginning of the meetings going, "How do you share the screen again?"
Yeah.
But you're just comfortable in that area. But also just in hardware, having a good, solid, reliable thing that you're not got a dodgy microphone that's really interrupting stuff, and where possible, things like decent internet and things like that. So just that whole good tech, making your team fit for purpose in that way. The one that's probably catches me out more consistently is the idea of over communication. I more
Mm.
tend to default to, I thought I'd already told people this, but you realize there are just a lot more misses in the virtual space than that. So this idea of over communicating things to make sure is still a muscle that I'm strengthening a little bit. And on from that, just following up, not assuming that just because people nodded in a meeting that was actual assent, because what you couldn't see was what the kids were doing in the background, or the cat that had just flown in through the window at the same time, and they just completely lost it in a way that you wouldn't have that same
Right.
effect when you were in person.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was the nod to the kid that they could have a snack or that they would complete
Yeah,
a task. It's
that's
good
right.
to
Yeah.
follow up on. Absolutely. Also, we talk a lot about out of communication comes kind of how you create culture and how culture is developed. So how do you foster a strong team culture when you are in different locations, you are in
Yeah.
different time zones? You even said that about switching time zones before, but how do you foster a strong culture?
I think viewing that the hybrid nature of the team is kind of really important to me. My younger brother was of a company of just 3 of them, and they only lived about 30 miles or so apart from each other, but they just never saw each other. I mean, ever. I'd get in the car just for a team meeting for 30 miles. But I think for most virtual teams, it's important to view yourself as being hybrid rather than just completely virtual. And a lot of that has to do with relational equity. You kind of invest and build up your relational equity when you're together, but particularly offsite. My team tend to do one offsite per year where we will just rent a great big Airbnb and we just spend all day together. And it's just wonderful for building that trust and relational equity,
Mhm.
knowing that you're going to eat into and use and rely on that relational equity on the times that you're apart. I think it's why the pandemic was an interesting thing for virtual teams. I think the switch to it was a lot easier for virtual teams because they were already in that space. But I think the length of it and coming out of that was quite harder because you felt like you'd used up a lot of that relational equity in the meantime.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. I like that mind shift too of thinking it as you're not just a virtual team, you're a hybrid team. And so even though the majority of your time is virtual, you are actually still meeting
Yeah,
at least once a year, a couple of times a year to build that relationship equity, as you said. And I think that is a mind shift change, maybe to make sure it's like we're a hybrid team. We're not just a virtual team.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that is an important mind shift to have.
Yeah, God made us relational beings, and I think it's just very difficult to be properly relational when you're just on screens with one another. There's a physicality to that thing.
Yeah. So, when your team members are in different locations, is
Yeah.
there anything that you do to kind of help inspire them or motivate them to kind of stay focused or passionate about their work? I think there probably is a sense that people are a bit self motivated to be a part of a virtual team. But what can you do as a team leader to help foster that?
I think that's right, Beth. That's a good catch in terms of starting point. If you've got people that just are not self motivated intrinsically, it's going to be an uphill struggle a lot of the time. But a lot of those things are about how can you, or just how can you bring that relationality by saying that you tend to just jump into virtual meetings as soon as everybody's finally connected and got their sound working. But I quite deliberately want to start our weekly team meetings with a bit of a catch up. And that could go on half an hour sometimes, just
Mm,
finding out how people are doing. And so it's bringing the humanity back into the meeting.
mm.
Yeah. All of us bring along a cup of coffee or tea if you're this side of the Atlantic, um, and just spend a bit of time as you would do if you were otherwise. And I think that kind of like builds into the motivation and the dynamic of how things work. There's a few other practical things, like we do virtual check-ins at the beginning of the week, so it's not just a reporting in, but we all know as a team what each other's priorities are that we're working on, and that just builds bits of connections of the, oh, can I help with that? And yeah, our time in our team meetings is important as well to make sure we talk about all the things that all of us are working on, so you get that overlap. I think we've got quite a good dynamic on our team of inviting and expecting feedback
Yeah.
on work, and it just builds those connections, particularly for my team members that are completely isolated. That sense of connecting with people, and you're not just in this little bubble. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
thinking about what you would do and then trying to transpose it into the virtual world.
Yeah. It's takes some of that intentionality
Yeah,
to not wanna just jump into, "Let's get the work done," but really
yeah,
building
yeah,
that, like you said, bringing back the humanity of it and allowing you to connect. Could you give us some, like, practical, maybe even tech platform things that you guys use on your team, just for people who are listening who this still is
yeah.
kind of a new thing that maybe they don't know what's out there? There's lots of options, but what are some of the platforms that you use that you have found to help make this possible?
We tried 3 or 4 different conferencing platforms, and we like to think of ourselves as the team that discovered Zoom before the pandemic. Um, Karen and our team introduced us to it, and we instantly fell in love with it about a year or so before the whole of the world did.
Oh,
So Zoom for me is still the best kind of like video communication. We use Slack for our check-ins at the beginning of the week, and also for all our other connections. We've just got the free plan, which is actually really helpful because it forces us into the space of that just being day-to-day connecting with people rather than anything that has any longevity to it. That's where we do most of our connections and most of our just kind of like, hey, we're going to move the meeting this week, kind of announcement sort of things, as well
mhm.
as pushing my team to actually just use the one channel for all the talking that they're having amongst themselves. So you don't have to think, did somebody send that to me in WhatsApp, or was that on Messenger? Or,
Yeah.
but actually all our team stuff happens on Slack, so you know where it is.
Yeah.
And then we've been using a platform Monday.com for our project management. So we're kind of pushing the limits on it. We actually use it for all our agendas and things like that,
Mm.
and have related documents where necessary. But Monday.com has been the place to go to for anything work related for us now. So yeah, those are our top three. Like most of our ministers around the world, we use Google for our document creation and storage. But
Sure.
yeah, those are the three maybe unusual ones.
Great. Thank you. That's really helpful. So, we really want to make sure that we are ending with some practical kind of takeaways, things that people can implement, especially if they're caring for a virtual team. So, what advice would you give to someone who is struggling with leading a virtual team or transitioning to remote leadership? What would you say to them?
Well, for me, one of the big helps was Ken Cochran, one of our former vice presidents, wrote a book called Close a few years ago. It's all about how you lead well across distances. And all his chapter titles are things like Move Closer and Close the Distance. And for me, it's all about making the leadership feel as relationally close as you can, and as closely mirroring how I used to lead a team when I was in youth ministry, and my team just used to turn up in my front lounge, and you have to kick them out eventually. But it was just that space for being a team. How can you close that distance between the virtual and the real life one? Can you call rather than write an email? Can you FaceTime rather than just call? Is this one of those situations where you just need to suck it up and get and be face to face with them because it's an important moment in life, or something that you just need to wrestle with? The main thing is that we have a God who is kind and gracious towards us. Jesus died so that we could not just experience his abundant grace, but so that we could give it to ourselves and to others. And leading a virtual team is a perfect context for practicing abundant grace.
Yeah, that's a great reminder for us that we've been given grace, that we can extend it to others, and especially when things are more difficult in communication or being farther apart. Thank you for that reminder that we need to extend grace to those that we're leading and those that we are working with. And we will make sure we put that book in the show notes below so you guys can check it out. But I just wanted to say thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today, for your sharing and your insight and of leading a virtual team. And so thank you for joining us on the LDHR podcast.
Thank you for letting me come and play.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned a lot today as Paul walked us through some of the unique challenges team leaders have when leading virtually and ways to foster good communication and culture, even in virtual spaces. If you found this episode or series helpful, please share it with a friend or post it on social media. It really helps us reach more people, and we'd be so grateful. Next week, we'll hear from Bong Visay in the Philippines about the importance of movement care. You don't want to miss it. See you next week.